All right, and welcome to Now This is Podcasting. I'm Connor, and I'm here as always with Calvin.
Hello.
And we have a special guest on today. You've come up in the podcast a few times, like we mentioned you and like movies you suggested, but we have Nathan on, our good friend Nathan.
Oh, I actually didn't know that one. Which ones?
I know, I mean, I can't remember the specific episode, but it'd be like, oh, like Nathan saw this, or we're talking about In Bruges today, and In Bruges has come up on the podcast before.
Awesome.
And just being like, oh yeah, Nathan likes that one. And so when you're in town, I was excited and like, let's have you on and talk about In Bruges.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
So this is a Martin McDonagh movie. He also did 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I think it's his most recent film.
Yeah, I think so. That really shocked me actually that it was by the same guy. I thought of Martin McDonagh as being more like a Guy Ritchie type director. I don't know why. I just didn't even realize that he was the one that made 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. But I can see it now, absolutely, because these movies, both of these movies are deceptively deep. It feels like there's just like a story on the surface, and it's well done, but there's a lot going on underneath.
And I think 3 Billboards, it's also like surprisingly funny, despite how heavy that movie is.
Oh
like,
yeah.
And one thing I thought about this movie, certainly that I think is my favorite part of it, is the writing is so good, and he wrote it as well. It's just like you can,
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
just like fits in so many jokes and like you said, like a really like heavy subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Calvin, let's get your first impression of In Bruges.
I kind of think of it like if Hot Fuzz had a baby with Albert Camus, and
What the hell is Albert Camus?
Albert Camus is a philosopher who's most famous in the existential circles, like for like his absurdism. The idea or the thought experiment that's most attributed to him is the idea that life is inherently absurd. It's equivalent to a Sisyphean tasks. We're all just pushing boulders up hills, and we have to find meaning in doing that. And I think that's how I think of this whole movie.
Sure. Yeah. How do you not know that? That's common knowledge.
Oh yeah. I just forgot about old Al Camus.
Yeah, everyone knows this. I need to make a little sound pad thing for
we called him Al. I wouldn't know.
What's your first thoughts on this film, Nathan?
Well, I think my first thoughts would have been like 8 years ago or something like that. But I originally watched this movie. I put off watching the movie because the name In Bruges and like the cover art looked boring as fuck. So like that looks lame. That like I think I told you guys earlier, I thought it was going to be like in the same kind of vein as Chocolat, which I have not also seen, so that was a very unfair judgment. But one day I was just chilling. I was like feeling a boring movie.
Yeah.
So I put on In Bruges. And it was not that. It was delightfully. For me, my favorite part is, favorite aspect of it is that there's so many dichotomies like all throughout the movie. It is all this absurdity is presented in very realistic, normal ways.
Right.
Like they talk like regular people talk about the most batshit stuff.
Yeah. I think, I forget that it's about 2 hitmen and like a child dies in this movie, and but it's like it's so funny that like I'm kind of taken out of that for a bit, like just because the dialogue and like I think the delivery is also like superb. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson are great in this. The dialogue and the way they present all of it, it like you forget like, oh, these are terrible people talking about terrible things because it's just so funny.
Yeah, for how goofy all their conversations are, they're really pretty well fleshed out characters, considering almost nothing they ever talk about is serious, at least on the surface. Like they kind of dance around a lot of the problems they're having,
right?
Whether it's guilt or what have you, but they do it in just in a way that you could almost imagine real people you might know doing it, and that they're not maybe great at handling these subjects, but they do it none the same. But at the same time, they are hitmen.
Yeah.
And they do just kill people casually.
Well, and there's like nearly a suicide scene, and which is supposed to be big, deep, and emotional. And then all of a sudden, Brendan Gleeson's he's like, "Oh, it's just hiding behind the thing," and it like cuts the tension right out of it. 'Cause it's just so funny.
Yeah. That's my favorite aspect of it. And it just does it constantly all the way throughout. It's like these normal people who are not normal talking about in a normal way about not normal things.
Sure.
Just all the way throughout, and it's funny and it's dark, and it just has a lot of depth to it at the same time, which it was just. I think it's a movie that I'm glad rewatching it. I've only rewatched it once or twice, but I've definitely picked up more things going through it a second and third time. But it's also just an instantly, easily accessible movie. It's just enjoyable.
Yeah, I think Calvin has like theories and stuff that we'll get into later. And he was like, "Oh, I'm excited. We can talk about our theories." And I was like, I just kind of sit and watch this one because I just have so much fun with it. I know there's probably like deeper aspects to it that I could like try to dive into, but I'm just like, I just enjoy it for like what it is.
Yeah, you could
like
not dig for anything and still have a great time with this movie.
Yeah,
it's just on a very surface level, it's just enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think that's actually part of the reason that I find it so interesting is because it wants to pretend like it's a movie that isn't about anything, and it's very good at doing that. It's so good at entertaining and engrossing every type of audience. It's a little bit different than The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse is one of those movies where I think it works on just about every level that you could possibly want it to, in terms of allegories and metaphors and psychological states, but also just pure storytelling. What's going on here is it's so subtle. You really have to know some of the you'd have to have heard of or seen the movie Don't Look Now, which is the movie that they're filming in the movie, and it's not the Chloe, the Belgian girl, refers to it as a pastiche or an homage.
Yeah,
which is funny because I think it's actually self-referential to In Bruges as being an homage to Don't Look Now. So I think that we can get into theories, and I don't think it's going to really, it might create more depth for some people, but I don't think this is one of those movies that I struggle to say that it was trying to. I think it was trying to be more than really just the surface level story, but it tried so hard to make you think that it wasn't about that, and it did it so well by like leaning into the bleakness and leaning into the fact that you have immoral people talking about the morality of certain things. Like, it sounds like it's actually kind of your fault that you got shot in the face.
Yeah,
if you think about it.
Yeah,
or like you're not trying to find what makes this movie so deep when they spend like several scenes talking about alcoves.
Yeah,
it's just like
alcoves.
How stupid! How could you get it hung up on alcoves? Like, we're talking about killing people.
So I think that's what you're saying, where it's like it does really well, I think, at disguising that it's deep, because it has scenes like that where it's just so goofy, and so you're not like actively looking for what like really adds depth to the film itself.
And that's the thing, like the characters themselves are so caught in the weeds and the mechanics of polite society, of the social conventions of things, that they kind of forget about like the big picture, like people die in a lot of things. And I think that's why I say this is so absurdist, and it's very similar to a lot of Albert Camus' philosophy, is because none of it really matters to Camus. No, human life is itself absurd, because all of it is inconsequential. So what we choose to do and then create importance out of those things is inherently funny.
No, yeah, okay, I could see that. I mean, without having like a recently taken a philosophy class or anything like that, I can understand how it like bleeds into this, like the way this story is built.
I can send you a podcast.
Oh, okay, great. I'm sure that's not a rough listen at all. I've listened to a couple like philosophy like themed podcasts, like from Stuff You Should Know, and they're always like snoozers for me. I usually skip those ones.
Oh man, yeah. They're actually the one I listen to. Like, don't worry, they're all British, so at least you get the accents.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they're like all university professors, so they definitely lean into all of the terms way that make it very hard to get into. So it's just like, that's just philosophy. It's just terms in reference to other terms, and unless you understand the language, it's all just gibberish.
Right. Speaking of being British, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson's characters Ray and Ken were originally written to be British, and then he heard their accents. He's like, "Oh, we'll just change it to Irish guys.
We'll just leave them Irish."
Like, which is great because the cadence and I think the way Irish people insult people is hilarious. So I'm glad that it just stayed with like how they naturally speak, because I think that's some of the best stuff is how when they make fun of people. It's so funny.
Yeah, and I don't know what would have been added by making them British either.
Yeah.
So if it's easier for them to just use their natural accents, then why not? It was great.
Yeah, I just love Brendan Gleeson. Like, the Americans are going to go to the top of the tower. He's like, "Oh, you don't want to go that way. It's really narrow." And it's just like so nonchalant, and they get so mad.
Motherfucker.
It's so funny. So do we want to get into some of the quotes? I mean, not quotes. Some of your theories on it then?
No, we can get to that at the end.
Okay.
We should talk about like we're at the point now where we should talk about the PC things and what that does or doesn't do for this movie.
Okay. All right. So I think Calvin, you had mentioned before we started recording that like maybe not the tagline, but like part of like on the cover of it, it was like, you know, a refreshing non-PC movie.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting way to try and sell a movie.
Yeah.
And this was also it came out in 2008.
2008,
right?
yeah. Which we were talking about too. Is like, was PC a big problem then? Like,
I
don't remember it.
I just remember midget being one of the first words where people were like, "Oh," I mean, other than like the N word, I feel like that was always just like obvious.
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like that was obvious to me as a child. Apparently, that's not. Apparently, my high school has a huge problem with it, Stu.
Wait,
So,
are you talking about midget or the N word?
the N word.
I don't know if that's a PC police thing.
I just feel like that's just like a human decency type thing.
Yeah.
And I think that midget, like what they were trying to move midget into that same sort of discussion. So I remember dwarf or little person being talked about like when I was in high school or like early college. So I mean, and obviously also you have the like being called retarded. Like that was another thing that was like
I think because Nathan and I watched it last night and then again today, and I just looked over him and I was like, I forgot that it's like pretty liberal use of a couple words that like just wouldn't be okay to say now. And I just, because this would have come out when I was in high school, and I don't remember PC being as big a deal when I was like growing up. I think it's a really big deal now. So if this movie had come out now, I think then you can put the tagline like refreshingly non-PC, and a bunch of people would be like, yeah, I'm going to go listen to people say things that I used to be able to say.
I think it was and it's hard to know without, I don't know, going back to 2008 and kind of taking a sample of the zeitgeist at the time. But it seemed to me to be very intentionally, like anything Colin Farrell says is, I mean, even in the context of 2008, there also might be differences between British, Irish, and American sensibilities. But it seemed like anything he said was supposed to be offensive.
Yeah, for sure.
Very self-aware, or the movie was self-aware of the fact that Colin Farrell, if he describes a person, is probably doing it in an offensive manner.
Yeah, no, that's true. I would agree with that.
And so that's why I don't necessarily have a problem with the way the fact that they do say things like that, because I don't think that you're supposed to like him for those things. I think it's a bad person saying not great things, and that's kind of the point. And that'll fit more into like some of my theories about like why that's really the case. Mm-hmm. Why you have like a bunch of not so great people that maybe have a little good, a little bad in them type thing in this world.
Yeah, I think Ray's like, he's the most likable when he's like the most like down and out and like the like most vulnerable, I guess. Yeah. And then he's clearly like funny and entertaining character when he's being an asshole. But I do think the parts where everyone becomes likable is when they take a break from like their shtick of like being offensive or being bad people. Yeah. And you like see like a little glimpse of like what they really are, like what's really hurting them or whatever. So I think that those are like I think you talked about like dichotomies and stuff, like seeing the two ends of like a character is like one thing I think this movie does really well.
Yeah. Like he clearly has a soft spot in his heart for some people, and then clearly doesn't for others.
Right. I also wonder. I want to talk about Harry a little bit. So he has like this code. He's like he killed a kid. Like he's got to go. So there's apparently a deleted scene. It's like a flashback to when he was younger. And
for Harry?
Yes. Oh. And like his partner is holding a woman who was killed at like a nightclub, and he finds out it was like a dirty cop that was responsible for it. So he goes to the police station and decapitates the detective or the policeman or whatever.
Holy shit.
And so it's just supposed to kind of build the lore of like this code, and like he's a terrible guy, but there's also certain things that he won't even stand for.
Yeah.
And he'll like go get justice for it. Do you think that scene's necessary, or do you get enough out of Harry's character just in the way the film was made?
I guess it depends where they would have put that. I mentioned like halfway through the movie, the first time you actually see Harry, I'm so happy that's the first time you see him. So if the flashback would have been before that, I think it would have detracted from, I don't want to say weight because it's a funny moment, but the first time you see Harry and he's like destroying his phone and calling his wife an inanimate fucking object.
Yeah.
Like if you had a backstory before that, it totally lessens the comedic impact of that scene.
Yeah, his introduction is like excellent.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you just hear a couple phone calls and a letter that he sent.
Yeah.
And that's like how you're initially finding out about the character, and then the first time you see him, he's just going berserk on the phone. Yeah. It's great. It's a great introduction.
Holy cow, is Ralph Fiennes? I don't know how to say his name.
Fiennes.
Holy cow, is he good at just expressing like bottled in rage.
Yeah, it's great. He's so good.
It's built for that.
Yeah, but I agree. I don't think that that I'm glad that scene is deleted because it's really not about Harry. Harry is a representation of an idea of the things that Ken and Ray had been talking about throughout the movie before. They was talking about like, well, how, you know, like I've done these terrible things, but how do you live like good lives? Or like, because they were talking about like, you know, I can't help an old lady with her groceries because she thinks I'm just gonna steal them because that's the world we live in. Yeah. You know, am I right? But it's the same sort of idea of like, you can only do. Even if you are a bad person, you still try to do good, and I think that's a part of the absurd aspect that Martin McDonagh is trying to underscore here. With that, these characters are still like concerned with either being good in some instances or appearing good, and Harry isn't really a part of that because Harry is something else entirely.
Yeah, he's almost literally like the angel of death or an agent of judgment.
Yes,
and so like, he doesn't really need a backstory.
Yeah, no, I agree. And his like code or whatever, or like his need to have Ray be held accountable.
Yeah.
Like that didn't need more of a backstory. Like that's fine. I can understand a guy being like, hey, you killed a kid. Like your time's come now.
Yeah.
So I don't think you need a decapitation scene to like really reinforce that like this is Ray's code or Harry's code. So
yeah, no, I think you got the picture without it. So
apparently the CGI for it was not convincing, and that's why it was cut. Which it's fine because I think narratively it is better and better for that character. I mean, you don't need to tell me everything about a character right off the bat.
Yeah. I'm glad that didn't work out because maybe he would have worked it in a way that was good. Who knows? But I mean, if I don't feel like it's lacking, then maybe it didn't need to be there in the first place.
Yeah. And I think for a movie that isn't like, I mean, it's about hitmen, but I don't think it's like over the top violent until you get to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the shooting of the priest, and like, I mean, that's violent, but as a whole, the movie isn't really focused on like the killing all the time.
There's a lot of casual violence. Just casually shoot a blank in a guy's eye.
I guess you're
casually
right.
knock out a Canadian.
Yeah. Oh, a bottle.
Oh, a bottle.
I love that part.
She could have known karate.
I love that part. Bottle. It's so funny. And then I love after that, he's like, I'd never hit a woman, but a woman with a bottle?
Yeah.
Had to do it.
A completely different class of person.
I guess I mean it more like, I mean, there's a movie called Hitman or whatever, and that's like all gunfights and killing the whole time. I'm just saying for a movie about hitmen, I think it had the violence toned down.
Yeah.
Probably why they called it In Bruges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if they called it Hitman in Bruges, it'd be maybe like send the wrong message.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I mean. Is like I think if you have a scene where a guy gets his head cut off, it would not, I think, tonally fit.
Yeah.
With the movie as a whole, I think it'd be over the top.
I think you're right.
But then it gets like really bloody at the end. So maybe I'm
yeah, but
talking out of both sides.
But that's the climax of the movie. And honestly, the kind of gore and violence at the end was just yet another one of the, I mean, you called them like foreshadowing or Chekhov's guns or what prophecies, what have you. Like they brought up dummy bullets or dum-dums or whatever early in the morning, earlier in the movie, and then he fucking used them.
Yeah.
And they had no heads anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. And same thing with Ken, when he's first up in the bell tower, he has like a finger gun and he shoots Ray. Yep. There's a few other, and especially I love like the conversation about the dum-dum bullets. Like, I shouldn't, but yeah,
I'll take those.
And that's exactly why the mounting gore makes so much sense, because it's a cascade of terrible decisions by people who are aware of the consequences and are reaping the benefits, or they're reaping the seeds that they had sown already. So it makes sense to cluster everything like that at the end, because if you had like another super gory scene
right
off to the side, it really slows down, I think. Or it really just changes the tone at the wrong point. There's a crux in the movie where suddenly it's like, oh yeah, this is awful. And if you had started with that beforehand, the climax isn't even a climax anymore.
Yeah. I think then it becomes harder to see Harry later in the movie and laugh at his lines when you saw him decapitate someone earlier in the movie. But then I say that, but like then Ray's character accidentally shoots a kid, and his lines are still funny after that too. So I think it's just the movie's just done so well that maybe I just don't mind it.
And I think part of it is because he feels so much like a child throughout the entire movie. Like everything he does is just impulsive and silly, like a child.
I love when he's trying to convince Ken to go out, and just even the way he's sitting is like a kid. He's got like his knees up and everything.
He's playing like grabbing his hands, or grabbing his feet,
yeah. It's so I think he's just a boy the whole movie, and he's just like he's trying to convince the old man to go out and everything. So he's got a lot of like I think good like boyish mannerisms. I love it. He's always like touching his mouth like with his fingers.
I love just
that little character.
They were very
trait.
consistent with like his tics and his mannerisms throughout the whole. I actually like that little detail. It's like you could tell when he was worried or stressed about something, because he did that every time.
Yeah, like when he's on the train and he's like got his hand, like his chin in his hand. It's like
like the most conspicuous you can be.
I'm catching a side eye from this police officer. Not me, sir.
Yeah. He's so stupid, but it's so great. I love it.
And I think that was probably intentional, because I mean they especially towards the end when Ken is literally saying to Harry like he can change, he deserves another chance. So I think him being childish throughout the whole thing is supposed to emphasize, even though he killed a kid, even though he's a hitman, like an air of childness or innocence that is worth, or that is capable of change and worth saving.
Well, and they both keep calling him boy throughout the whole movie. So I think that's it's very much implied that like psychologically you can almost think of them as two aspects of his own conscience. Like one of them wants to kill him. That's his suicidal tendency. And there's the other part of him that doesn't want to die yet. And it's just another layer of the absurd idea of like, if none of this matters, why don't we kill ourselves? Well, there's this weird undercurrent of all human consciousness that we want to keep living for whatever reason, even if it's in fucking Bruges.
I love how upset he is that he has to be there. It's so funny. Another like little character trait I noticed. I don't know if you saw, he wears the same like suit and shirt every day. He just changes the buttons on it, like how it's like. I think the scene where he's about to commit suicide, he has it buttoned all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
And then when he goes on his date, he's like trying to figure out how many buttons to leave open.
One or two. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I was catching that, and I was like, is he wearing the same shirt every single day?
And I think too that lends to like he's brand new to this job, and he's like a kid.
Yeah.
And Ken's experienced it because he changes clothes. He has a bag of other clothes, and like his wardrobe changes throughout the movie. But Ray is like brand new and sucks at this.
Didn't know how to pack,
and he just wears the same clothes every day. That's like like little subtle character bits that I think like enhance the film. So I was happy to see little things like that. All right, so I want to talk now about some of the art in this. They go to a museum and there's a couple paintings hanging up. One of them is Death and the Miser, The Judgment of Cambyses, and I think it's the one with like the guys like sitting on a knife, and Ken's talking about it being about like judgment, and that's The Last Judgment is the name of that painting.
By Hieronymus Bosch,
yes.
Which is also something that Jimmy references later about how the dream sequence that they're shooting is a Boschian horror. So yes, the paintings, and it's also Don't Look Now, like how both of those are are very strong influences on this film. So let's start with the paintings, though. The paintings are so fascinating because it's all about brutal consequences for your actions. So it's like the miser and death. Like the miser has saved up all of this wealth, but by the end of his life, even death comes to collect his toll, and that's kind of like Harry at the end. And same thing with the judgment of Cambyses. He was a greedy money changer, I'm pretty sure, and so he was corrupt, and so the town basically just flayed him alive. And then the last judgment. It's interesting how Ray is kind of aghast at the first two, the miser and death and the judgment of Cambyses. But then that the last judgment appeals to him in some sort of way. But it's so interesting because that's what's absurd about this movie is the juxtaposition, those dichotomies like you were talking about of like these bad things and these good topics. Like what morality seems to be at the forefront of everything they talk about, even though they seem to have no problem just killing people.
Right. All the paintings, they all make me feel uncomfortable. They all make me feel like just looking at them, I'm like, man, I've done something wrong. I know it. And I think it's probably the point because I do like you feel judged looking at it, like, oh, like I'm in that group of people that are going to be held accountable at some point. And so they're like uncomfortable to look at. That's why, but it's still great because then they have like great dialogue during it where they're actually discussing like a real issue and like what the painting is. And then there's like a goofy line in it, and but it's not like I think like Marvel does it really badly. They'll have like serious moments and then they undercut it with a joke, and it's just like so out of place and so goofy, and it's like for like a kid. But the way I think they'd all like blend together really well, even in a scene that I think is pretty serious. Like I said, like a lot of heavy subject matter in this film, and it's not like ruined by like comedically timed humor.
Yeah, and because that's the same idea of human life. Like even if we were just constantly contemplating how we're gonna die someday, we still find ways to fill moments with laughter and things of no consequence, even in the face of the ultimate consequence. And so that fits in thematically. Whereas with Marvel, it's all about who cares. Honestly, I mean, I feel like if anybody has listened to any of our other episodes, I feel like I haven't done the last few Marvel ones. But if you listen to any of our other Marvel episodes, I basically have the same ideas over and over. This is the same movie over and over. So
I think you had mild praise for Loki when we talked about that one, but that's like as good as it's gotten.
I don't think you remember that episode correctly.
And also, a lot of Marvel, I mean, kind of to your point, a lot of Marvel movies feel like they're just an algorithm at this point, or like they have a map of how dialogue goes, of how stories go, and you don't deviate. And so a joke to cut the tension is just part of the formula.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas in this case, they're doing it the whole movie. It's just his character. Like they will get right up to the line of actually having an honest discussion about guilt or what have you, what the issues they're facing, and then diffuse it with like Colin Farrell's character just either, can't focus long enough to take that next step, or Ken's character just isn't comfortable, addressing it directly with him.
And that's such a great point of what you're making, because that's also the biggest theme in Don't Look Now. The whole point of that movie was the director, whose name escapes me currently, can I make grief the driving force of an entire narrative? And that's what it is. Like, this couple loses their child who drowns at the beginning of the movie, and there's just constant miscommunication through the whole entire movie, and it just compounds all of the problems that they have in their relationship. Like, they can't actually start to get over this situation anymore because they're constantly at each other's throats, pulling each other apart. And then you have all of these the guy starts seeing visions of the future, and that's why I think of like all of these callbacks, Chekhov's guns, as very similar in style and tone to Don't Look Now. So they have an extra layer of artistic interpretation with why they're being included in this case. So it's so much more than like a nod of the head to Don't Look Now. It's its own thing, but it still lives like within the universe and the idea of Don't Look Now.
Yeah, I want to watch that now or do more research on it because then I think I'll probably. It feels like you've been able to pull a lot of things out of this movie that, like you're talking about how it's like clever and how it's deep, which like I said, like I kind of just watched it for the value it has on the surface. So yeah, if it's like an homage in itself to Don't Look Now, then I would probably pull more out of it.
Yeah,
for sure.
that's also why Jimmy the dwarf is in this movie. There's actually one of the characters in Don't Look Now is a dwarf, and that's why he's part of the Boschian nightmare scene. So it's interesting that how Jimmy is used in this movie because it's very, very different than Don't Look Now.
I think Nathan had a question. He was like, "Does Martin McDonagh just think that little people are funny, and that's why he's in the movie?"
That's very sudden tangent from what we were talking about. But yeah, when I guess speaking to how Jimmy is used, but I had that question. I'm like, some of the shots make me think that Martin McDonagh just inherently thinks that dwarves are funny. But also, so much of the other humor, even the offensive humor in the movie, is self-aware. That I'm like, are we viewing his existence as funny through the eyes of these characters? Or does Martin McDonagh actually just think that it's hilarious that these people exist?
I'm just imagining him like set up for the scene and everything, and he's just behind the camera, like cannot stifle laughter. Yeah. Like as soon as the actor playing Jimmy walks on set, like he just thinks it's so funny.
Like he's real life Colin Farrell, where he sees a dwarf in this, and he's like, "Oh, guys, they're filming midgets."
Yeah. They like cast him like, "Oh man, just wait till you see your costume."
Yeah.
Like, in particular, the one it is really only one shot that made me have that question, and it's the one at the bar where he's getting the wine and the beer off of the bar top to take it back to his hooker. And I'm like, that shot feels like it exists only for Martin McDonagh because he thinks it's funny.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about it because it also feels like just like this is the type of these are the type of things that we take for granted as people whose environment is built to suit our height, whereas his is not. Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, everything else in the movie, even for being having heavy themes, it's almost continuously a joke, especially when Jimmy is there. So it just put me in the mindset like, everything else involving Jimmy has already been a joke. This must also be a joke, but maybe it was not intended that way.
Yeah, or it could also be like that's from the viewpoint of Ken, because I mean that's clearly where the camera is set up from. So maybe it's his view, and I think we're not seeing Martin McDonagh's views on dwarves. We're seeing society's views expressed through all of the characters on dwarves as inherently funny because you don't belong, or like you're too fat to climb that tower.
Yeah,
like that type of idea. There's
Do you think Martin McDonagh hates Americans?
It's so funny that's like so often like, but don't hold it against me.
Yeah. Don't hold it against me. Yeah.
Like I think I said when we were watching,
the guy in
like
the Yankees cap.
Yeah, I love that he has a Yankees cap.
And the callback, like we had an American have a heart attack on these stairs. A couple days ago.
The movie's just full of that. Like we mentioned the bottle thing already. They have the conversation about the bottle, and then all of a sudden the lady has the bottle, and then they have the heart attack, and then I think too, like the one I laughed is like they show the swans earlier in the movie, and then later on Harry's like, well, "Did he see the swans? Like it's magical. It's fairy tale." Like,
how can you see
just so many
and not think it's fucking magical?
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, I don't know that I think I'm not sure that I think he just thinks that they're inherently funny, and that's why he was like, I need to have a little person in my movie. I think of things like Jackass, where they have Wee Man in it, and I think that is, I mean, I'm sure they're friends with Wee Man. They all seem to be a good crew. Yeah. But I think when you see like a little person doing these weird stunts, like that's when it's like, oh, it's inherently funny because of his size. Yeah. Which I don't think this movie is doing that. But I like your theory that the director just thinks it's hilarious, and he's like, I gotta do it.
It's like right on the line for me. Like I think he has a narrative purpose. I mean, obviously there's like callbacks to other movies. Don't Look Now. I think he has a place in the movie outside of his comedic intentions or value. It's so constant in every scene he's in that I'm like, I kind of think that Martin McDonagh just thinks that dwarves are funny.
Yep. I'm not gonna deny that's possible.
I don't think we will or can find any evidence one way or another. It was so constant. It made me think about it. I was like, this seems like more than just a narrative device at this point. It seems like actual just jokes.
We got to just get him on the podcast and ask him.
Excuse me, Martin McDonagh.
We've been dying to ask you.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Dwarves.
This is a safe space.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else to say about the paintings? I know we kind of diverged from that for a minute, but yeah, I think aside from it being a moment, like I think, we're there. Like I said, like I think the best parts of these Ken and Ray is like when they are being honest and like kind of vulnerable with each other. And I think that was like one of the best scenes. Let you know that it's not just kind of funny movie all the time. It is trying to like have a serious subject. And I think that's one of the better scenes for it.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could look at this whole movie and not laugh once and still be incredibly entertained and find a lot out of it. So I think that's when the movie really started to take a turn for me, made me realize that, oh, this is actually really deep and really well thought out. It's not even like that, oh, I'm just making allusions to other art and stuff. It's like I'm making these allusions because they underscore a thematic element that I've brought to this movie that you can or can not observe. But if you do, it will increase your enjoyment of this work.
I enjoyed the paintings also from another aspect, in that, I mean, one being like the Chekhov's guns or the foreshadowing or what have you, and that, like I mentioned Harry as being an angel of death or an agent of judgment earlier, and it's kind of in reference to those paintings. Those are literally in those paintings. Mm-hmm. It's kind of foreshadowing events to come, those events being Harry. And I kind of like to think that, I mean, besides just the fact that the Bosch painting was, it's just a wacky ass painting, and for a childlike figure like Ray, it just has a lot more going on to seize your attention. So just on a very basic level, it makes sense. But also, I mean, given that they recreate the Boschian nightmare, or what they call it later, he's kind of judged and comes out the other end. Him looking at that picture is kind of the only picture that offers a chance of, if not salvation, then I think he brings up purgatory. Like it's right. The only one where the person's not already dead.
Yeah.
Like there's an other option.
No, that's a good point. He has this, he's seen the painting, so he has like kind of like an idea of it, and then he like goes and lives it, and then
and I don't think that's what the character is thinking. He's like, oh, this is the only one where like it's a crazy ass picture. Yeah. I think as a thematic device,
right? Yeah.
It's like in the death and the miser and death. That one's already like been judged. That one's done. The one where the guy's getting flayed, he's been flayed. Yeah. It's done. The judgment is in progress, and not everyone's going to hell in that one. And he talks later about like, do you believe in hell? Like, do you think that's real? Do you think purgatory is real? Do you think all that's real?
No, I like that idea. Yeah, it's the only one that you can influence still.
Yeah, it's the one that still has. I mean, going back to Ken wants to find him salvation. It's the only one of the three pictures where there's still an opportunity for salvation.
While bleak, I would say that, because like you said, the painting is really crazy.
Yeah, the painting is batshit.
Nathan just hit the nail on the head to what I want to talk about for theories. Okay,
then let's move on to theories. Like I said, I didn't really have any because I was more surface level on this one, so I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are, Calvin, because I'm sure they're crazy.
Spitballing, like those thoughts were forming as I was saying,
and that's perfect because that is exactly what this movie is doing. I think he literally is in purgatory, and that's why he's in Bruges.
Oh, Bruges is purgatory.
Bruges is purgatory. That's why they literally say it at the end. Get this, he is the kid.
Oh,
because when he pulls up that note, it says, "I'm sorry for being moody," which Ken admonishes him for immediately. I'm sorry for being bad at maths. I had 5 pints and 6
Oh my
no,
God.
I had 6 bottles and 7 pints.
Yes.
And then for being sad. And then immediately after that, he's crying on the park bench because
Sure.
he killed a kid. I think he's literally living an adult life where he thinks he killed a kid because he really committed suicide in his real life.
Oh, okay. I like that theory.
So
I don't have any like substantial way to disprove that. Like, there's no like, well, but this scene.
that's also why
what
he
I'm saying.
can't leave Bruges.
Yeah.
That's why he gets pulled back for punching the Canadian,
The Canadian.
because he can't leave Purgatory.
Yeah. Okay. No, I like
But
that.
then is Bruges hell or is it purgatory? Because he says himself, like, what if hell is being in Bruges forever?
Yeah, Purgatory, hell. In this instance, it could be the same thing. But I think of like the,
So wait,
the last.
is he? I feel like you have two different theories here. Is he the child or is he himself, but in purgatory for killing the child?
I think he's living a memory of himself killing the child, and like, so it's like he hurt someone else. It's not like you committed suicide. It's like you have to carry the guilt of killing someone else because you're killing the possibility of a child. I think that's why it's even more messed up than what happened in his real life. I think he killed himself as a kid, and now he has to live the idea of him being an adult, which is why he is a kid the entire movie. He's stomping fit. He ran up to the when they were filming like a kid at the zoo.
Yeah.
Like hung on it with like a beer with like his beer bottle. Like he just acts like a kid the whole time. I think he literally is a kid in an adult body, carrying all of the shame and guilt of committing suicide, but thinking that he killed someone else.
Wait, what? You lost me, man.
I don't hate that idea.
Like, wait, he committed suicide
As a child,
as a child?
yes. And then he now has to live as an adult, or as a child in an adult's body, thinking that he killed a child by accident as a hitman, which is why he has all of these childlike mannerisms, because he's still emotionally a child, mentally still a child, and is in hell living this over and over again.
I think you lost me on that wrinkle. If you were like, it's Colin Farrell, Ray. If it's Ray doomed to purgatory for the crime of killing a child, but like he's, still has a possibility of redemption in Bruges purgatory, I think I can follow you there. The fact that he is a literal child who committed suicide, that seems a little bit far for what we see in the movie.
It's because of that note.
It's neat. Yeah, I understand the note. I feel like that's, I don't know. I guess that is a connection to Ray's character, but I don't know if that means that he was actually a child when it happened.
Yeah, that could be. That's just like how I rationalize all three things: the note, the fact that a child died, and the fact that he acts as a child. I don't disagree that maybe like he is just living like a child. Like he has this guilt and lives like that child did because he's trying to somehow embody the qualities that kid never had, of the life that he was never able to live. And maybe that's part of like how he expresses guilt, is the things that the kid said that he was sorry for.
Yeah. No, I think if I was going to come up with a theory, I would think that maybe if he had killed himself at the park, and then the rest of the movie is him in purgatory.
Yeah.
Because then it would still make sense because he couldn't get away on the train. Yeah, kind of just his growth at the very end where, he's getting loaded into the ambulance and he's, essentially like spelling out that, it might be purgatory or hell or whatever. So I could see it in like that. I don't know that I love the idea of him being like a child or...
Yeah, I'm just hesitant to...
But I'm not against you either, though.
I'm hesitant to follow you on a theory that violates the plot. In that, like, they have an exposition at the beginning saying this happened.
Yeah, but I think those are like when
he might be an unreliable narrator, but it's still, in order to literally believe that is what happened. Like Martin McDonagh was writing this, like he was a child who committed suicide. You have to also take the supposition that he's like, and also all of the explanatory like dialogue to lead us into the situation is a lie.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like that's how I would take it, and it's I say that because it's not unusual for film to do that. For a film to be exceptionally vague about what it is, about them being mindscapes, because we've talked about that a lot. That a lot of times that stories are representations of singular emotions or singular ideas, but they're expressed in a completely narrative way, and these narrative elements have no actual connection to any real thing that happened that's being expressed as an idea. I know that is a weird thing to say, but I think that all of those things are our expectations of stories. Like I wash my hands in a Burger King. Like all of those things are things we expect. Like it wouldn't feel real if there wasn't that explanatory dialogue, but they're ultimately unnecessary to the expression of an idea of shame and guilt of a character who committed suicide and now has to live this cyclical hellscape of the guilt of killing himself. Those are wild and out there things, but those are like higher levels of film theory and critique that I've been exposed to that I can understand. There are people that think of their movies like those things, and they'll just, but a lot of times they'll be like, well, I just want a certain level of vagueness. Like you can get that out of that if you wanted to, or you cannot. It's just like, sometimes I'll be really cagey about it. Some people just outright say that's exactly what I was thinking about. Like with Robert Eggers and like the actual lighthouse being a phallus. Like there are wild ways that people make their movies, and a lot of times they are expressly that way. I wouldn't be surprised if Martin McDonagh was like, wow, you're really grasping at straws there, you idiot. That's why you have like 80 subscribers on YouTube. But that it's not unheard of.
I can follow you like 80% of the way there.
That's all I want.
I like a lot of like the whole idea of Bruges purgatory or hell. I mean, I guess they kind of say it, but taking it a step further, I do like that. It's just it's the child in the church and he actually committed suicide part. That part, I'm like, I'm not sold on that, but that's okay. The rest of it was very interesting.
I'm glad. That's all I'm trying to be, is a little interesting.
Blowing my mind, man.
No, and that's not as bad. I think you've had other theories about some movies where I've definitely been like, I don't get any of that. But yeah.
It's funny because I feel more confident in a lot of those other ones than I do this one.
You were talking, I was like, yeah. What?
But no, I think that it would be good to go back and watch it and be like, okay, I can pick up on like some of this, like what you're saying, and then I think if I looked at it with that lens of, okay, what is the deeper meaning and what is the movie trying to do besides just kind of like be funny, then yeah, I think I could pull more of that out. I think that's not a bad idea. Mm-hmm. I do like the purgatory idea. That was what I suspected your theory was. That it dealt with Bruges being purgatory, because I had forgotten at the end that he has like that little monologue. So
that made it. Yeah, that I kind of had that thought as it was ending, and I was like, but I didn't really give it more thought after that.
Yeah,
I sort of think that a theory like yours, Calvin, probably fits better if there isn't a monologue at the end. If it's more ambiguous, then you can be like, oh, you can really kind of run wild with theories.
I think your theory would have, I would have had much more buy-in if it didn't have the short monologue at the beginning and the monologue at the end. If those were missing, and I think the movie would have been 100% fine without those. Like especially the one at the beginning seemed 100% unnecessary. I was even thinking as he said it, like you could just start from the first scene. You don't need that first thing. Yeah. Minus those details, it would have been a lot easier to follow you on the child thing. But it was,
The other reason I
love
think
that Calvin watched this. He's like, this needs more child suicide in it.
Obviously, guys.
How do I work that into this movie?
Well, and the other reason that I do think of it, because I also think of it, both Ken and Harry as being aspects of Raymond's subconscious. His actual guilt is playing out as tension between these characters who both commit suicide.
Yeah.
And I think that also... that reinforced to me the fact that like I am still going to sacrifice myself to do the good thing, and I'm still going to kill myself because you have to stick with your principles. I think again, like those just go back to how messed up of a mind he is that everybody wants to kill themselves. I mean, even Harry says it, you're suicidal, I'm suicidal, we're all fucking suicidal. Like we just keep carrying on. It's that absurdist thing going on over and over that really drives home the point.
Keep talking about like the absurdity of the movie and like, why do we keep, like, why are we in this rat race, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that the movie does a really good job of like painting that. It's like, it's always sucks and it's always hard. So like, why are we still doing it?
So if you think they're like aspects of his personality, if they're like his, super ego and it or whatever it is.
Oh, we do Jung.
Yeah, we do Jung.
Oh, sorry. I'm ashamed. If they're the little angel and the little devil from the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Perfect.
Then what do you make of the fact? I mean, we mentioned they both kill each other, but for different reasons. One, angel of death, angel of judgment, killing himself in accordance with his code, and one killing himself in service of saving another person. So, what do you make of the fact that they both? Is it still suicide if you kill yourself in trying to save someone else? Is that still considered suicide?
I think that goes back to the idea of the morality. Like, you have these terrible people doing, caring about good things.
Like if I jump in front of a bullet to save someone, is that suicide?
I'd say so.
I don't know. I know it's a homicide for sure.
Well, someone committed homicide, but did you commit suicide? I don't know. Sorry, I cut you off.
No. I agree though. I think that's also. I thought you were going to ask me a much harder question, which I have a small answer. It
sounds like you have a question you want me to ask you.
Not really. Like, I just, we've talked about like anima projections before, and wise old man, wise mother type things. There's a few of those characters here, but I don't know how much I want to get into them, and there's obviously something that I just don't know as well. The shadow self, all of that stuff is a lot easier for people to understand. And I think in the context of someone who's already dead, you're never gonna find like your true self. You're never gonna have the idea that everything's gonna finally come together and you're going to be able to reconcile your psychological state. And I think that's really what hell is. It's like for Ray, like, he was never going to get his answers. He's never going to get out of Bruges. He's never going to feel whole or safe or good, and he's going to live that forever.
So what then do you make of the love interest? Because that seems to fly in opposition to that, because that is an opportunity for happiness and, within the place he's in. He found, if this is purgatory, that's where he found this person who potentially brings him happiness.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the point, is it's potential happiness, but he always dies before he actually gets to finish the job, so to speak.
I actually like that you brought that up, because I had a thought about that too, was he never actually, it seems like he never gets to fulfill whatever he wants to do with
he even says
the
that.
girl. Yeah. And so like they're about to sleep together, and the ex-boyfriend shows up, and then they're having a nice dinner, a nice evening at the very end.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of when the whole climax of the film happens, and then he's being carted away and she's crying. So it's like he never actually gets to the point where he's actually done what he wants to do with her. And I think that's part of purgatory, is where you can't be happy and you're never fulfilled. And so I think the love interest is like, it still works even if it's purgatory or punishment or like hell or something like that, because it never like quite works out for him.
Yeah.
When in regards to her.
That's fair.
And why he's like, I haven't had a shag in months.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole point of, that's true suffering, is having something right at your fingertips that you can never actually have.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, you put that a lot better. It's like he's never quite getting the thing he really wants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I want to refer back to something you said, Nathan. He had Harry killing himself at the end because he's like got to live within his own code, fallen victim to his own judgment, and then Ken, sacrifices himself in a way because he's trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that this is them escaping purgatory then? Maybe Ken is going to get to go to heaven now because he is doing the right thing, and he's going to sacrifice himself to do the right thing.
I think under Calvin's theory, they don't exist. Like, they're manifestations of
Ray. Just Ray.
Yeah.
But
if purgatory is real and this them escaping,
let's suspend our disbelief and say that they're all their own person.
Sure.
Yeah, which I like, because honestly, I mean, I know that the focus is on Ray, but Ken is also a person. Like, Harry is not a person with too much depth. Like, he's funny, he has a code, and he's a killer, and all this. But ultimately, he is a cudgel. Like, he's a tool for things to happen. Ken is actually a character. Like, he has his own conflicts independent of Ray, that interplay with Ray. So I like the whole it's all Ray's purgatory thing, but I also think it's a disservice to Ken, who is in his own right just as much. I mean, he's not the one having as much of a struggle, but you can tell Ken is also working through the things he's done in his life. He's like, yeah, I've killed some people. Maybe that's not who I want to be anymore.
Yeah, and you could make the argument then that when Harry says that everyone's suicidal, that literally everybody is there because they committed suicide, and so that's why they still feel those things, is because and why everything is unresolved is because they died with their own blood on their hands.
Sure. And the people of Bruges are gonna call you and be like, "Why are you gonna make this place sound so bad?"
I mean, it's a shithole.
But under that theory, then Harry is not one of those people, because he's one of the only people we actually see outside Bruges. So he's not a function of the arena they live in.
That's true. He is, well, and that one's unfortunate because he does kill himself. So he's plays both sides. And I don't know how to classify him then, if then he's not like an expression of just Ray's own mind.
It is just interesting to me in a movie that seems to be like funny but deal with real morals. Like these two bad, I mean, they're all bad guys. I mean, they're all murderers.
Yeah.
But the fact that like Ken and Harry, like at the end, they still have like this sense of moral obligation to carry out whatever they like fits into their code or whatever they think is the right thing. Yeah. And they both still carry it out. And like, that's admirable. Especially Harry, I think, is like the worst person of the three. Mm-hmm. Despite that, you know what? It's the right thing for me to do this because I did something so bad I can't exist anymore. Yeah. Part of what makes the movie so heavy, but yeah, that kind of the impetus for him to kill himself is that he actually shot a little person instead. Mm-hmm. He's not even need to be held accountable under his own code, but he still goes through with it. So it's seeing someone's head blown off, it shouldn't be funny, but that scene is kind of funny. And then kind of also the moral implications of it should make it like feel really heavy.
Yeah,
but
like,
it's like,
why does it matter that it wasn't a child?
Yeah.
It was still an innocent bystander.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, got to stick to your principles, which is absurd because they're perceived principles in that case, and he still does it.
Sure. I think about that sometimes, like when I was in the Navy, and it's like you have your own kind of idea of like what's right and wrong. There are some people who think like military in general is evil and we shouldn't be doing these things. And here I am like doing this service, and I have to justify it to myself sometimes, you know? And I mean, I wasn't ever doing anything crazy like Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson in this, but yeah, it reminded me some of that. You have to pick and choose your morals in some ways and be like, well, I'm going to do this job, and it's not awesome all the time. I feel like I have an obligation to do this or act this certain way. And that's how I went through this movie thinking a lot. It's so funny to me that like they can do these terrible things and talk about it, but still have like their own set of morals that they still need to be held accountable to. All right, so I think we're going to wrap this one up. Nathan, on a scale of 1 to 10 alcoves. What do you give this
Nooks
one?
And crannies, yes. Man, I love this movie. I mean, I gotta be that asshole. What's average? Is 5 average or 7 average? Are we doing?
We go to
A,
10,
B, C, D?
base 10.
Well, yeah, I know out of 10, but is 5 average or is 7 average? Are we doing like?
5 is average.
5
for
is
us.
average.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there have been very few 9s.
Oh man, I would give this a 9.
Sure, yeah.
I feel like we also do like Connor's the only one that does that like whole numbers. I like to do like 9 point.
Oh,
he always adds a
that
decimal.
surprises me none.
Yeah.
Man, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't have enough of a background to say whether it's like high art or not, but it just works on so many levels. It works on a base enjoyment level. It has a lot of deeper stuff that we kind of touched on, and it's not perfect by any means, but it's so good that any kind of flaws it has, I feel are pretty easy to excuse or gloss over. So I don't think I would normally be a very gentle grader, but I love it so much. I feel pretty comfortable giving it a 9, or at worst maybe an 8.9.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. I think I'd like sit at an 8 because I love it too. I think it's great. I don't think it's really doing anything very interesting in terms of like cinematography. And then we didn't really talk about it much. I think before we talked about the score.
Yeah.
And it's got like that really kind of goofy theme for Harry at the end. It feels out of place.
Yeah, that took away the 1.1 was entirely Harry's chase theme.
Yeah. So I think one thing that would pump it up for me is like it felt like there wasn't any interesting shots really, and then I didn't like love the score, but it's fine. Mm-hmm. That's not a big deal to me because I don't really think it's not the point of the movie or anything like that. I don't think it's trying to be high art in terms of the way it's setting up its your camera and like what you're like what are we getting in the shot. I don't think it's trying to be interesting in that way. But it's just excellent. I just love the writing so much, and I love the performances. So yeah, I would put this at an 8 alcoves.
8 alcoves.
So the cinematography is actually very, very heavily influenced by Don't Look Now.
Oh, okay.
So it's not that it was trying to be interesting in its own right. It was trying to match a lot of the similar aesthetics that Don't Look Now was doing. So, and it's also the first shot and the last shot of the movie are the same.
Yeah.
Which
from the like looking up at the
church.
Yeah.
So there are some things going on there. They're not Ari Aster. They're not Robert Eggers. They're not evocative for the sake of looking interesting as well as communicating themes and ideas. And I think that's its success. The camera mostly stays out of your conscious, like your conscious experience of this movie is like we don't really know where the camera is a lot of times. We just get the sense of what it's trying to convey, and I think that's a success in and of itself. For me, I'd give this is like 9 alcoves and 2 crannies.
Dang, dude.
Wow, 2 crannies.
Yeah, 2 crannies. Wow. So because this
What's
is
the conversion rate on crannies to alcoves?
2 or 1 to 10.
1 to 10. Okay, so it's just a decimal point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't want to give it a full nook.
I didn't know if it was like 6 shillings in a pound or something.
No, that's good. I think this movie deserved good high scores because it's so much fun to watch.
It's so much more clever than I thought it was going to be. I think it's way more clever even after watching it twice than I think now. I think it is, especially if I were to go. It's been like 12 years since I've seen Don't Look Now. That movie is so influential for a lot of reasons, and you as a viewer might not necessarily recognize its visual style or its influence, but when you look at historically directors that have been influenced by this movie, it's a lot of directors that have found some reason that this movie was transformative for them, and it influenced their work. So it is a massively important film, especially when we talk about like psychological movies themselves as well. It's so good. So to have a movie that somehow mixes black comedy and the high art ideas present in Don't Look Now is and to be able to execute that's just pure brilliance.
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't think it's impressive in the way it's like, oh, it's stunning me visually, but it's just like it feels like it's never like a dull moment in the movie, and it feels like it's really deep, but then it also feels like you could just watch it and not need to feel like you just went through some big experience that you need to mull over for a long time. You can just watch it and be like, oh, that's so funny. I had a great time.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, with that, we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks for being on, Nathan. I was like so excited to have you, and I was really excited to talk about In Bruges. So I was glad that we had both seen it, we both liked it, and then to get Calvin on board too.
Yeah, Calvin was I was ready to fight this man, but he came in and he's like, jazzed about it.
Yeah.
Glad to all be on the same page. It might have been more entertaining if we were at loggerheads here, but
sure.
I'm glad we agree.
Yeah.
In Bruges, awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have good taste. I don't want you to think I don't think you have good taste, Nathan.
It's not that. It's just I can never tell when you're going to zig when I'm going to zag. I think we agree on a lot of stuff, but it's always surprising to me when we go in totally opposite directions.
Sure.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, because there are movies where I zag a lot.
Stalker.
Oh man, we really got to do that. That's
we really don't.
Greatest movie of all time.
Do that.
We were talking last night, and he was like, "Has Calvin made you watch Stalker yet?" And I was like, "No, he talks about it a lot, though." All right. Well, thanks again for being on, Nathan. Thank you for being here, Calvin. And remember, you can find our podcast on Spotify or Apple Music. We also upload all these to YouTube. So go ahead and leave a comment. Tell us what we're doing well. Tell us what we're doing wrong. And if you have any suggestions for movies we should do in the future, go ahead and leave in the comments. And thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.